This is Call with Dad's podcast, where today's issues, concerns, and joys of being a dad are discussed, with your hosts E.A. Maynard and Mr. Pancake sharing their views, experiences, and all things they know. Join the journey with us. Welcome to Call with Dads, more than a podcast or a website, but your home for a community of dads who want to be better. Now let's get started.
I'll tell you what.
About that.
I'll tell you what. How about this? Well, since we're already starting really to dive into things, let's really dive into it and get talking. So, everybody that's listening, if you're watching the video, obviously you see that Ben Black is here with us today. He is the creator of Lords of X, which is where a lot of the guests that we have comes from. We've met a lot of people there. It's a great group. And I can't speak enough about it. Even courses on there that he gives for people that are part of it. I mean, Ben, you do a wonderful job with that. You also have a Twitter account is where I originally met you from, that just does amazing work, gives out amazing information and helps fathers and even parents alike to be able to have an idea of things to improve. What did you actually start all this for? Why?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's really generous, maybe a bit too generous even. But the reason that I was compelled to start this actually came about when my wife first conceived our daughter, or we first conceived our daughter. I was actually created a generic, boring I know, but generic personal finance blog, and I was going to make all this money blogging and all this. And I just enjoyed the writing process really, and it was more like I treated it semi-seriously, but more like a hobby than a business. And then my wife and I conceived Hazel, our oldest, and I was actually worried that I was going to be a bad father. So it was like, I'm not ready for this, et cetera, as so many of us go through. So I set about just reading a whole bunch of literature, child psychology, development, neurological development, stuff like that. And I was really I wouldn't say obsessed, but passionate about the direction my family was going to head, because I didn't feel prepared. And that sort of got me onto the idea that from the relatively large amount of wealth, I'm not going to say that I'm like a super rich guy or anything like that, but versus other people in sort of my age range, I have done quite well for myself. And I wanted to figure out how to propel and jettison that forward to the next generation. And you hear it from everyone all over the place. Give them an inheritance, it's going to make them lazy. You're going to hinder their development. They're going to take it for granted. And I wanted to figure out why it is that some families can do that, while most families that take this generic advice that's typically given by these wealthy individuals anyway, can't. So that was really the impetus. So I went from generic personal finance to parenting to dynasty building. I think that's at least to me it seemed like a pretty natural progression. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
So I drew a lot of passion in that, and I'm still passionate about it now, thankfully. And I want to try and inspire that more, because if you look at it historically and how probably I'll say in the last 60 years, I'm hesitant to say that because I think it's really been happening a lot longer than that, but really it's been sort of accelerated in the last 60 years, that's kind of been drained out of people, that desire to better the next generation, and kind of just I don't want to say coast, because I don't think that's fair, but not make it your purpose in life to better the next generation. And by that I don't necessarily mean people are putting parenting aside, but I think that the idea of legacy and dynasty is really just something that seems unfathomable to the average person, and I want to try and bring it back, and that's really what I've set out to do with my X accounts and the Dynastis brand in general.
All right. So let's go with this, if I may, is the fact of when people think of legacy and dynasties and things like that. Like I said, that's not something the average person usually thinks about. Their thought is, oh, I own a plot of land, I'll leave it to my kids, let them deal with it after I'm gone. Or I have a couple grand saved up in my savings. Once I die, they can manage it, do whatever. That's what people usually think about legacies and dynasty. It's not in the sense, like for me, and I don't know if this is just my thought, is I think of legacies and dynasties not solely financially, but morals, values, traditions, things like that that you pass on. Is that
Even
kind
a
of the
name.
direction? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that kind of the direction you're going, or what is your view of a dynasty, I guess?
So now that's perfect framing there for me to give my spiel here. So for the average family, like let's ignore like Warren Buffett and the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and everything like that. For the average
Right.
family, it used to be commonplace. So
Evil? What?
it wasn't actually, sorry, what was that?
Is it evil? What did you say?
Yeah, well, we can ignore the evil part. Let's just focus on the family part. So in studying these families and others, um, even families that haven't necessarily done particularly well financially, but have still managed to maintain adhesion between generations. What it really came down to was the culture that they'd forged. So that the money was really put aside as like a second thing. Yeah, it helps, and having the money will help, ease the burdens of the other areas of capital. But really, you've got to be focusing on three other forms of capital first before you focus on the financial. So there's four main categories of capital that's going to matter to a family. They are human, intellectual, social, and financial. The human capital is like your culture and the people within the family, and that should be your first priority. Then you have the intellectual capital, which is like the knowledge that your family possesses and the secrets that it has. And that's not like dark secrets, but like trade secrets. So
Hmm.
things that will give your family an advantage. Then you have the social capital, and that's your reputation and your social connections. So like the social circles you operate in, knowing people at country club, golf club, even friends from work can count for that. And then finally, you have the financial capital. And the financial capital isn't really to be spent by any single individual for lavish purposes. It's there to be used as a tool to better each generation. So it's to be used to enhance the creative competency of each generation. And it's a tool to be borrowed from and leveraged, but never spent. Does that sort of cover your question there?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, so with all that, what becomes your, because obviously it mutated, like you said, you started as financial. And as much as people want to say financial is boring, if you're if you're a parent, if you're trying to plan for your future, financial is an important part to have. Definitely something to focus on. And when you said when your first kid was being born or was just born, you had this big fear of, oh, I'm gonna be a horrible dad. I mean, I think a lot of us dads, especially new dads, have that thought. Is because I can tell you, when my first son was born, or when my son, I only have one son. When my son was born, literally, I remember sitting there going, "Wow, I don't even like kids. I am not going to be a great dad." I mean, literally, I hated kids all the way up till my kid was born, and now I love my kids and I tolerate other people's kids. But for the most part, yeah, I would think all of us has that thought of, what am I going to do with a kid? How am I going to raise them? Dads are going to sit there and think, well, if I have a daughter, I can't go and do this, that with. When, like for me, when I had my daughter, it was completely different, which we've discussed in a prior episode, Mr. Pancake and I did. But I mean, it's a concept we all kind of think about. So for you to not manipulate, for you to morph from finance and then have that dread weigh on you that you do all that researching and reading, what was the factor that you felt that helped you become the better dad so that you can start moving forward and help other dads?
It's a big question. Um, Let me see here. Now, I think for me, it was wanting to maintain the family cohesion. So I don't come from like a broken family or anything like that. Very normal. Went to school. My mother stayed at home until my younger sister went to school. So it was a pretty normal family. But one factor that I saw was that um, I was like, well, I was like the black sheep in my family. So like I didn't like the things my dad liked. So my dad was like, and he's not a bad father. I'm not knocking him, don't clip
All
this out
right.
as a sound bite and use it against me. My dad was a good dad, and I love my dad, but he didn't take. He sees this now, but he didn't take the interest in me that he could have. And yes, he was busy with work, and he did work a lot. He had an electrical business, and eventually I became his apprentice. But he, once he saw that I wasn't into sport, which was what he wanted a son who played rugby essentially. He was like, well, he's a write-off. So and when it did come down to the point where he realized that this is my opportunity to bond with my son, to connect with him, etc., it was too late. I was a teenager, that everything had been set in stone. And so reflecting on that throughout, like how my childhood was, and the connection that I had with my father, and how I viewed him as something that I wanted to definitely capture elements of in my family, but that comes down to bettering each generation. I know I can do better if I just take the good things, trim off the bad things, and then add my own good things in. And that for me was when I was reading through how these other families. So I started off like, oh, how do you preserve wealth? And then when I realized it wasn't actually about wealth, it wasn't actually about the money, it was about the family culture. That's when I realized, okay, that's what I've got to start factoring in. And if I can just sort of tell other fathers that this is how you do it, and to stop worrying about the money, it's you don't prepare the money for your family, you prepare your family for the money. And that's why you should always prioritize your family connections, your culture, your intellectual and social capital before you even worry about the money. It's possible to create generational wealth, quote unquote, without actually having any money in the first place, because it's about your family cohesion. And a family that works together is able to accomplish so much more than a family that's compartmentalized and isolated, especially in the modern day when you look at the rate of inflation, and groceries like 2 times as much as they were 2 years ago, etc. It's really going to, I think, from now, the way forward for the future for 80% plus of families is going to be cohesion. If you want your children to do well in the future, it's not down to how much money you make now or anything like that. It's about how well you can keep your family together, and they will benefit immensely from that cohesion and that cooperation. If you want to frame, I think the best way to frame it, to really paint the picture for your audience, is if you have a business. So let's say you are a builder, and you can build houses, right? But you can only do the framing, or whatever. I'm not a builder. I can build a chicken coop, but that's about it. So let's say you're building, you're framing houses, and then you got to ring up, get an electrician to do the wiring. Well, I'm an electrician by trade, by the way, but I did machinery, not houses. But so now you've got the electrician. You need a plumber. You need a painter. You need a stopper. You need whatever, roofer, whatever, right? But so for you as a builder, in an isolated instance, you have to outsource this labor or work with other people that etc. Maybe you can hire other builders, but looking at it from business perspective, you're a builder. That's it. That's your skill set. Now, if your children fill each one of those roles, so you have an electrician son, you have an accountant daughter, you have a roofing son, etc., then you can bring them into the business, and collectively you're able to accomplish more. I mean, you have enough kids, and you could theoretically build a house all on your own. The analogy I'm trying to make here is that if you play on your children's strengths and you keep them close, what you can accomplish together is far better than what you could do on your own. And the same applies to them as well. If they're going out there and working as electricians or roofers or accountants, and they don't have that ambition, for one, of the entrepreneurial ambition or that sense of cooperation, they might just wind up being stuck in a job that has deflating wages for the rest of their lives. Whereas if you are able to keep that cohesion, get them working together, the number of doors that opens and the amount of potential that unlocks to them is effectively unlimited, especially when they're going to be entering into a world full of competition of people who aren't adhering to these rules.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, thoughtfully think about. I know Ben, you're not American, but I mean, maybe you understand American stuff. Look into American society, and in our society, financially speaking, not to bring race into this, but which race is the best in all of America? It's not white people. It's not black people. It's not Hispanic people. It's not Asian people. it's Indians, the ones from like India. You know why? They got like 4 generations and they all work for the same business and they all live in houses within each other. Like I had some Indian friends that when I lived in Georgia, um, I met the guy because he owned a liquor store that I used to go to all the time. And I talked to him one day. I'm like, is this your liquor store or you just work here? What's up? And he's like, oh yeah, it's me and my family's. We actually own all the liquor stores around town, as well as all the gas stations named. I think the gas station was named One Stop. There was 8 gas stations, and each of their family members, ran one, and there was about 12 different liquor stores, and they all lived within a 1 mile square, and they all lived down there. And they all drove like fancy Teslas, and this is 12 years ago. You know what I mean? They all had nice cars, and they all their kids ran them, all the dads ran them, and then all the granddads were at the point where they no longer needed to. They had built this, like, I guess for lack of a better word, dynasty over the course of the last like 40 years of starting with one little gas station. And after all talking to this guy for all these years, because I was stationed in Georgia for 4 or 5 years, so I kind of got to know the guy. I always went in there pretty much like twice a week, and I would always get like a bottle of whiskey. Back when I drank a lot. I was in the military. What do you expect? So whatever. But I would go in there and get a bottle of whiskey all the time, or a bottle of vodka or whatever, some beer and stuff like that. And I talking to this guy over the years. Yeah, his granddad started with a One Stop, and the One Stop gas station was still actually there, and it was out on the highway. And now they had like a bunch of One Stops and a bunch of liquor stores, and they had like built it over the years, and their kids took over this and that and so on and so forth, and they just developed this dynasty of a family. And that's, it's kind of a culture that most of American society doesn't follow. And yeah, you're right. That's what we got to focus on, that getting the family to stay together and work together.
And I'm so glad you explained that question. Sorry, no. I'm so glad you explained that question, because at the beginning of it, I'm sitting there going,
yeah,
where are you going with this?
Are we going to have to cut this out?
Right. Yeah, no. I know I can be vulgar sometimes. But yeah, no, seriously. In American society, the Indian families are actually have their net worth is more than every other race. If you separate all the net worths based on race, Indians have the least number of actual people in the United States. They're like less than 1%, whereas white people are like 68, black people are like 22 or something like that. Indians have the most. They have more than all of the other races, and there's like none of them. There's less than 1% Indian in America. And it's all based on the fact that they stay together as a family.
Definitely. And that's if you could even take my analogy a step further and say not all the children necessarily have to be in the roles of that business where they are, being the roofers and electricians. They can also be the managers. And there's no one you can trust more in these roles than family, especially if you've trained them from a very young age and they know they're going to be coming into it, and you're making sure that you're preparing them in the right way. And not just like handing them the easy job through nepotism, which I'm not actually against. Except for politics, I'm not against nepotism.
Right.
But as long as you're bringing them up in the right way and putting them in the right positions, it greatly extends the capability of your family. Especially if you look at what happens to some people when they put managers in roles, and then those managers sort of I'm going to say swindle, but they take advantage of the position they put in. Whereas for a family,
one of the grandkids becomes an accountant. They no longer have to hire an accountant. They just right there. So, they'll have to be a liquor store manager. You can be an accountant, and one of the kids can get into AC and be an air conditioning repairer. If you have 12 gas stations and 10 liquor stores, you're going to be pretty busy working on them ACs for quite some time. That's a lot of stores to work on. You know what I mean? So you no longer need to hire an air conditioning repairman.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point.
Let me ask this. So, and I think I already know the answer because I'm kind of doing it myself, but where do you find it easiest to be able to, like you said, teach your children the values and be able to instill those things so that you can pass on and increase the dynasty, your legacy, all these things to keep the family going. Because, and this might be my own prejudice coming out, but when you send a kid to public school, they spend 8 hours and they do as much work in that 8 hours that, like with me homeschooling my son, I do in an hour and a half. So, and my
And they
son's
send you
in
home with
that,
homework.
yeah. And my son literally in kindergarten is already second or third grade level, where kindergartens they go in saying, okay, if you don't know your alphabet, we'll teach it to you. I'm sitting there going, no, kids should know how to read before starting school. But, and that's when I realized, hey, we've already been teaching our kid, but we've also been teaching them our values, our outlooks, our dispositions. And there's a quote that's just been, I don't know why, for the last few days have been stuck in my head that I heard where it's, the student will always try to become the master. The question comes down to is who is going to be the student's master? So if your kid's the student and they want to become like the master, the person they're learning from, do, do you find it, and I know I'm kind of ranting here, but do you find that the people that have their kids go off to public schools, and I don't know how it is in New Zealand with the school systems there. I know here in America they're just a disaster. You have a handful of good teachers nowadays, and then at least in my area, you can't go anywhere without one faction of group of people trying to push an agenda and people. I mean, it's a mess all the way around here in America with the public schools.
I'll say it, trans people and LGBT crap. It's bad. It's not for kids. I'm sorry, it's not.
No.
I don't care if you want to be gay. Have fun. Good luck in your life. Don't put it on my kid. I'll crush your skull.
Oh, I agree with that, but I'm not talking just them as well. They're a part of what I'm getting at, but there's also the people pushing the sexual content to kids.
Right.
I mean, these are people that aren't part of that trans or LBGQ, or I guess the new thing is what's called furries, kids that try to pretend they're animals. I mean, it's crazy.
So another one's DEI, that diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah,
and I
keep up with these
know,
acronyms, man.
Yeah, my company was pushing that stuff the other day, and man, I blasted them. Like, I'm like, look, y'all got to quit this stuff. Like, I understand you have to put it in your company culture or whatever, but I mean, you want to diversify, be equitable, and then include everybody, but then you want to select somebody based on their race, skin color, and heritage and cultural heritage. That to me is racism. That's exactly the definition of it. So I don't understand. You're working backwards, and
so contradictory.
Like, and they do it. They do it in school too, and it's the worst thing. But
right.
You gotta stop.
So with that rant from us, I mean,
it captures the essence of the question. Yeah. So I have a couple of opinions on this, and the first is that, well, maybe three, but let's see how many I remember by the time I'm done ranting myself. Okay. So the first is, the best opportunity is homeschooling. And that allows you to capture your family culture. It allows you to teach in your own way. It allows you to build on your children's strengths. It allows you to give a much more focused attention to your child's education. And when you think about it, at school, I don't know how many kids are in a classroom over there, but here it's like 30. There's even 60 in one of the local ones, right? 2 teachers, 60 kids. And think about how that's being divided. The attention that comes from the teacher. That's in an hour. That's like 2 minutes per child. There's nothing.
Right.
At that, and that's not including like walking around and so there's like the 20% of the kids that take up 80% of the attention, etc. And it's just not going to lend itself well to your child's development. So if you can, and I would argue that maybe not most, but maybe half of people actually can. It's just they're not willing to make the sacrifices, or they feel like they can't.
Right.
And yeah, it does take sacrifice. I mean, all this does. So if you're not willing to sacrifice things to build your family and grow a dynasty, then what are you even doing? You know, but let's just ignore that and say that people can't, okay, for whatever reason. When it does come down to the school system and putting your kids into the school system, because for a portion of families, the school system might be better. Maybe they have a bad home life, or maybe the parents are rock bottom, trying to recover from alcoholism or something like that. It's still no reason that the parents can't invest in their child's education in the evenings or get up earlier in the morning and work on it. Every parent, especially fathers, as I know fathers make every excuse in the book to not, spend as much time with their kids as possible, and they should stop doing that, really. At every given opportunity, you should be working on your bond with your child. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be 100% focused attention sitting down talking to them. But if they're in school, then you have to counter that in any way you possibly can. And there's lots of ways you can do that. It's not necessarily sitting down and doing book work with them. In fact, you could probably, if they're going to school, you could probably largely ignore that, because they probably are going to be getting, I mean, they will be better off if you're teaching them the book work as well, but you're probably not going to have time for that. So really, you should be focusing more on your culture and including them in things. Whatever projects you're working on, whatever hobbies you have, they should be doing that with you. There's no reason they can't be involved. It's going to take longer. Like every day, about between 2 and 3, I will stop work, close my laptop, go outside and work with my kids. Yeah, it takes me like 10 times as long to do the most basic of tasks, but it's worth it because I'm teaching them how things work. Like my son can just determine what a weed is and what a seedling is. We have a patch of carrots here, and he can tell these tiny little, minuscule seedlings. He can tell that they're a carrot seedling, and he can tell what a blade of grass is, and they look almost identical. But because I've taken the time out to teach him that, now I can say, "Oh, go and weed the garden," and he will do that, and he loves doing it because he knows it's contributing. And if he weeds the garden, then he's going to get carrots, and he understands the delayed gratification. I mean, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a book up here. I wrote an entire book for my kids about delayed gratification to teach them that. But the third option is, if you can't invest in if you really, for whatever reason, feel you can't, there's a gun to your head, you can't do that. The most important time for your child is before the age of 6. So if you can take the time, and the younger, the more critical it is, but taking the time to invest in your child is incredibly important when they're young, because that is where like, this boils my blood. I'm going to try not to get angry, but a lot of fathers say, they won't remember anything before they're age 2, so it doesn't matter. And that it doesn't matter if they can remember it or not, because what's happening is their brain is unfolding from this tiny little nothing when they're in the womb to an entire personality. And you really want to make sure that you're cemented in that before the age of 2. And making excuses to chuck them in daycare and making excuses for them to go to preschool or whatever. And the absolute state, it's not as bad over here, but the absolute state of like what preschools or whatever you guys call them, pre-K or whatever over there, is abysmal, depending on what country you're in. And keeping your kids away from that and making sure that you're cemented in their mind is critical, because there's an element in child development, and it's like pivotal in how they're going to develop and what their values are going to be when they're older. So there's a peer reliance, and then there's a parent reliance. And there was a study done a long time ago now, 1994, and they compared what children were like in 1964 to 1994 and what they prioritized. And they were basically inverted. Whereas it was parents at the top, by the 1994, it was parents at the bottom. And now I'm sure they've been knocked down. That was the top 5, by the way, so I'm sure it's been knocked down a few pegs now. Yeah. So making sure that you are in your child's mind from a very young age, and let's say, gun to your head, you have to go to work, you have to, put your child in school. They are going to value your relationship a lot more if you're able to invest that time when they're younger and sink that time into them and keep them out before the age of 2. Keep them out of any outsourced parenting. That's effectively what it is. I mean, everyone complains outsourced jobs, outsourced labor, and then they jump for joy when they're able to chuck their child in daycare. And if you think about from 6 months, I know somebody here, and I am imploring her not to do it, but I'm not going to get into it, but she's adamant that she wants to put her child in daycare so she can go back to work for a very low wage job because she's got a mortgage to pay. And I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to be angry. But she just doesn't seem to realize just how important that early connection is going to be for her and her child. And it's a real shame to see. And I think a lot of people either underplay it or have been fooled into underplaying it, and that's probably a more fair assessment. And understanding the difference between these peer relationships and the parent-child bond is critical. And if they aren't able to attach to you when you're young and get that connection, understand that you are a source of unconditional love, because parents are the only source of unconditional love. There's everything else in life's a partnership. So like with your spouse, with your friends, there is at some certain point a tipping point where they're going to say, F you. So, but with your child, it's incredible. Like my son had me up at 2 a.m. today. And man, I was annoyed, but, I still love him. But if my neighbor came and did that to me, he's probably not going to be my neighbor much longer, or at least we're not going to be on good terms. So it's really down to helping your child to understand that and facilitating that. So to answer your question in the most long-winded way possible, those are my 3 views, with the first being the preferable.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate on this, because for me, I got lucky. I got into a company that allows me to work from home so that I can also homeschool, balance things out, and all this stuff. So my wife goes to work full time. She's remote maybe 2 days a week at best. And that's really a lot of times of what people have. Now, one thing that I find is parents, like I'll admit, when I'm cooking dinner, I'll put on the TV, which is usually like Pancake or something wholesome. I know, but I can also watch and hear everything that's going on. But I also know a lot of parents, like I am not going to say I was not without fault doing this before, but would give their kids a phone or their phone or something like that, and it would be the default. Here, take your phone. I have to do this for work. I have to make dinner. I have to clean the house. I have to do this. I have to do that. And like I said, I'm not at fault without doing that. The one thing I did find when getting involved in the dad sphere, listening to the people from Lords of X and things like that, I did find that the big problem isn't necessarily having like a TV show on, but it's having that little phone right there that they control, they change, and they're having right there. Because I ended up picking up that once the big TV was on, they would watch it, but they would also be running around playing while the TV was on. They would watch, run, play, wrestle with me. My son would come and punch me in the stomach and all this stuff, the things that boys do. My daughter would try to push him away. No, don't hurt daddy, kind of a thing. And I found that once I got rid of the phones and just had the big TV on, it started becoming more about family time and not just them focusing on what they're watching. And I think a big problem, and correct me if I'm wrong here, like you said, people are outsourcing the parenting. Big problem now is like they're not outsourcing everything as they think. Part of the outsourcing is giving your kids that tech, that device that is so focus oriented. I mean, like parents didn't even have the same issue where they'll sit on their phone while their kids are doing stuff and ignore their kids and play on their phones. It's from all ages that everyone's.
I can't stand that.
Yeah, but I think people need to learn to get away from technology and back to the building blocks of family, to actually do something along those lines of building that. Because, and like I said, correct me if I'm wrong here, if I'm going on a tangent way off, but from like reading a lot of the things that you put out, reading, like I said, the stuff that I read from Lords of X, the people in that group, a lot of it seems to me that if you want to build a legacy of your values, that you have to get your kids away from the outside influences and be that influence on your kid. Because by the time you realize you want to spend time with your kids, they're not going to be your kids. They're going to be somebody else's. If it's the media's, if it's whatever cartoon or fad or celebrity or whatever it is telling them to do stuff. They're going to be their people, not yours.
Yeah. Well, let me jump in and say, let me be a third devil's advocate here. And now I'm not being a devil's advocate to say I'm against homeschooling. Not even close. I think homeschooling is like absolutely number one. Um, so because my kid isn't homeschooled, I'll play the side of the parent who doesn't homeschool and questions it, right? So like my kid, the only reason my daughter doesn't go to homeschool is because and by 100% by accident, we moved to here where we live. And it just so happened this school happens to be in the same town as us. So we got lucky. We, tried to join it or whatever, and we got lucky and got accepted or whatever. And our daughter goes to that school. So this school kind of it's a private school. It's Christian based. It's classical Latin style education based. It's also since we live in America, it's based off they teach the U.S. Constitution. They teach capitalism and stuff like that, and general American freedom. They also take absolutely zero funding from any government entity, any corporate entity, or any outside donations whatsoever. They take none, zero. All of their funding comes in-house from either donations from employees or parents, or tuition and selling things like uniforms and stuff like that. Everything comes in-house from doing stuff from acting like a business. All of the teachers and all of the staff are also all parents as well. So essentially, it's just a large version of a homeschool where our kids kind of are being homeschooled, but not, where they go to a area to be home. It's kind of like that essentially. I would say it's more classic how schools and stuff used to be years and years and years and years ago. So the education that they get is very similar style, where they get very unique. Their classes are like 10 or less, and they have 2 teachers per class, 10 or less students. So they get a lot of that stuff. So outside of that stuff, that's the only reason why I don't homeschool, because it's a very, very unique opportunity. But set aside from that, what do you guys say to like a parent that's worried about the social aspect? You know what I mean? So how is your kid going to get all these social connections with all these other kids, and where are they going to meet these friends and their buddies, and how are they going to grow up to high school and underage drink and get in a car wreck and do all that stuff? How are they going to date somebody and go to prom, and how are they going to have all these unique experiences that most people have when they go to school? And then the other side of that, dang it, I dropped that one. Well, yeah. So that one first. How do you deal with that? You know what I mean?
Well, I can take that. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of approaches. There's a couple of comments I have. So first of all, the social aspect isn't as challenging to replicate as we're led to believe. So in terms of like when we actually moved, long story short, we moved from a big city to remote New Zealand, right at the beginning of like all the lockdowns and everything. And we had a 2-week-old baby at the time, so it was pretty hectic. But so we struggled to integrate with the community here early on, because we weren't supposed to, and most people in New Zealand are pretty complacent with all that stuff.
Right.
Now, once that all cleared up, or at least we had a break from it for a time, so I won't get into it. We managed to go to social groups here. So there's stuff that the church would organize. There's library groups. There's a local community on Facebook, and my wife's active in that. And we've made friends through that. And even just like, I don't know if you guys remember being a kid, but when you go to the park and there's another kid there, it's like you make eye contact and you're friends now, So there's also that element as well. So in terms of getting like the social aspect, it's not as challenging, especially when they're young. It's not as challenging, but it's a matter of maintaining that and keeping that up as well. So like our daughter has friends, my son has a friend. Well, he has friends, but one that he knows and talks to and stuff, and another one that he just plays with. But he's quite young; he's 3, so he's a friend is like someone that he'll go to the museum with and talk to.
Right.
But so in terms of like making friends, it's not actually that challenging for kids. It's more the parents being lazy that I think gives that impression of a lack of social connection. Because I mean, it's 15 minutes drive to the nearest town here, so it's like easy for us to just be like, right, lock the gate. We're never leaving the place. We can do that, but we make the effort to go to town, to go to the it's like a large town here. I don't think you guys would quite call it a city, but it basically is a city to us. And that's a 45, 50-minute drive away, and we go there for a homeschool group, and that's like dozens of kids, of all ages. And my daughter's made friends there. They have friends come over, and it's in terms of the social side, it's not as challenging as people have been led to believe. And then the other comment I had on that is when you thrust children into a peer-centric environment, and you might say, oh, a school's education-centric, but there's only so many adults in that environment, and they turn to other kids for comfort, support, and for connection. And when you thrust them into these environments, they and their the pattern of their brain kind of rewires itself to migrate towards children of their own age. And what winds up happening is you have, and you see it all the time. If you look at the schoolyard, the kids aren't hanging out with, like an 8-year-old's not hanging out with a 13-year-old, and then 4-year-old's not learning things from an 8-year-old. I guess you gotta have 4 at school there, but six hang out with 6 and so on. They kind of congregate in these age focused groups, and that's natural in like a like a wilderness kind of setting, like in a wild environment, Lord of the Flies type thing. But it's not natural in terms of like a social hierarchy. So when it comes to you and your interaction with your children, you become the dominant force, so to speak, and you're teaching your children how to become adults, so that your kids are being raised by adults to become adults. They're adults in training, effectively. But when they're thrust into these peer-centric environments, they're children being raised by children and learning mannerisms from children. And then the counter argument that I don't know if you were going to make it, but I want to make it anyway, is that people say, they need to learn, they need to individuate, and that's why that teenage rebellion happens. But I would counter argue when they go and do these things, car wreck, get underage drinking, car wreck, that's not that is rebellion, but it's not individuation, it's conformity. They're conforming to a standard set by their peers that's typically being created by media. So like think about the rise of the teen movie. If you go back and look at things historically before then, okay, cars were a little bit slower, and you needed to crank the handle at the front, but they didn't get into these car wrecks. They didn't get into these incidents. They might have got into like a brawl with a neighborhood friend because they misinterpreted a phrase in the Bible or something like that. But they were individuating in a different way, and you're still going to face that rebellion stage, and they're still going to want to go against you and find out who they are, but they're going to find out who they really are rather than trying to align with some cultural standard set by other children.
Right. I agree with that. There's going to be a little bit of a differentiation and rebellion, stuff like that. But things like, I mentioned that stuff specifically to play the devil's advocate, but it's to me, doing that stuff is, like you said, conformity. They're trying to be cool and trying to fit in. That's why they drink and do that stuff. The car wreck is just kind of
just taking the extreme.
Right. The car wreck is just kind of something that happens due to the fact. But like most of that stuff is conformity. I know a lot of the kids have social anxiety or social issues with like how they dress or how they look based on also same thing, conformity. If as they get older, adults don't think of that shit, crap. Adults don't think of that crap. I could literally give two, what any other dude thinks I look like. Why do I want another dude to think I'm good looking? Gay. So not interested. But when you're a kid, you don't process like that. You want the other guys to think you're just as cool as they are, or whatever, your muscles or whatever, just as cool, whatever the case may be. So it's essentially a form of conformity. If you're sitting with majority adults all day, you don't really think of that stuff. The other question I had is, and I'm a big proponent of I don't trust your answer and your opinion based on something from authority. You know what I mean? So if somebody says, well, this political entity is better than this political entity, and I know so because I'm a political person with a political degree, this and that. Like, all right, good for you. Your authority means nothing to me. You know what I mean? So, in a sense, what makes you as a non-licensed, non-registered, non-educated teacher, who do you think you are to teach? That's right. See what I'm saying? Like so don't take that as me actually doing that. I'm trying to do it for the people listening. I want them to understand.
No, I
okay.
get it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
So, you can take it.
Can I, yeah, well, I want to start off real quick as just a reminder when we had to that question in itself, a prior episode when we had Jake on, it literally was saying even the superintendent of the school he worked at is an elected official that could be from the bank, the sewer system, whatever. As long as they got elected, as long as they got elected, they ran the school. And he even mentioned in that about how teachers, when he started teaching, it was a real challenge for a teacher to find a job. Now, at least here in America, and I don't know how it is in New Zealand, teachers no longer have to have a teaching degree. It's almost, and it might be me misunderstanding, but it's almost as bad as, from what I got him saying, is if you have even looked at a kid, you're qualified to be a teacher in America nowadays. Because all the good
shortage over there.
Well, the problem is all the good teachers are leaving for the simple fact of, in these schools, they are, a good teacher wants to teach. They don't want, like, I have no idea if any of the teachers I had growing up were married, if they were nuns, if they were whatever. I had no idea about anything. I didn't even know most of their first names. So that's how teachers used to be out here, is you never knew really anything personal about the teacher other than they were either good, they were people that you would probably TP their house and burn a bag of poop on their front porch, or they were somebody that you barely thought about because they were just a class you went through and they just did the bare minimum, so they got a paycheck.
Nowadays, cops are quitting being cops because they don't want to be arrested for being a cop.
Yeah.
Same with the teachers. Same reason for the teachers. Exact same reason.
Yeah. So, I mean, here, and like I said, I don't know how about in New Zealand, but here a big problem is I'm more qualified knowing what's right for my kid because I'm the one that's raised him. I also know how he learns, what he does, and things like that, compared to somebody that has a gender studies degree that can't find any other work, so they decide to become a teacher. Yeah. So I do remember that movie. So, but I mean, Ben, I don't know, I didn't mean to step on your toes there, but where were you going with it?
So my opinion on this, like, let's say you do have someone with a teaching degree. Most of that teaching degree is how to manage a classroom. It's not how to teach. I mean, there is an element of teaching one-on-one and understanding the child psychology, but it's nothing you can't read a few books about and understand yourself. Most of what a teacher knows how to do is how to manage a classroom. And most of a teacher's day is managing the classroom. I don't know if you remember what it was like in school, but I felt bad for the teachers in hindsight, especially the high school teachers. But and now it's worse because now we have phones being commonplace. There's a lot more disrespect that happens between student and teacher. I don't know what your experiences are with other people's kids, but I see the way some other people's kids talk to their parents and how disrespectful that is. I can't imagine how they treat a teacher. It's like someone that doesn't, cook their meals effectively. I mean, you think logically it would make sense to be respectful to the person who's feeding you, but there's an element there of like a layer of disrespect, and it's commonplace, and it comes from like, teachers say you can call me by my first name now. Get off that. There should be like a layer of the respect there, and but that's all gone from the classroom environment now. And I'd say that, and like you said, like teachers can come from any walk of life now and become a teacher because there's such a shortage. And if that's the case, and the system is accepting any teacher or anyone that wants to become a teacher to become a teacher, then why can't it accept us as parents who know our children and have done an all right? I like to think that most parents do at least an all right job of raising their children and getting to know them. Then what's to say that they can't educate them? It's not that hard to pick up a few homeschooling resources that literally walk you through step by step on how to do it. And give them to your kids. Like my son is doing like a book intended for, I think, 4 or 5-year-olds. My wife does most of the homeschooling. I do like the practical hands-on stuff. But my wife's picked up The Good and the Beautiful, which is like a homeschooling resource. And like my kids, my son has like never been much of like a sit down type. He's very much a boy, wants to run around, ride his bike, stuff like that. But he's really taken to this, and he's like it turns out, despite the fact that like without necessarily a concentrated effort on it, he's still very advanced for his age because he's had that concentrated effort from both myself and my wife, just talking to him, having conversations with him, showing him examples of things, counting, reading to him, and just that concentrated effort alone without a focus on the necessarily book learning education side has proven him to be advanced for his age. So in terms, like, even if you look at like what a teacher is and say a teacher has like a 100%, let's make the math easy, let's say they have a score of 100, or that, and they have a class of 50, because I'm going to do the rest of the math. So that's divided among 50 people. Each child's only getting a 2. Whereas like, let's say a parent's a 30 and a score rating of teaching capacity, and they have 2 kids to teach. Well, they're able to give each of those children a 15. So already just by that, arbitrary scoring metric, I don't know how you can score that, but just through that arbitrary metric, they're still going to get a better education as a result.
Yeah. How are you going to teach your kid complex trigonometry?
Well, when you say that, I am an electrician who worked in machinery.
Not you, then.
Factories and stuff like that. Let's say
not you, then.
Let's say generic. Let's say I don't know anything about it, right? Let's say I didn't use it to make 6 figures in terms of sales for power factor correction units. Okay, ignoring that. So what I would say is when your journey as a parent kind of transitions through several phases, and the same goes for when you're a homeschooler as well. So when your children are young, you are a teacher. You are educating them through individual aspects, answering a lot of questions, etc. But when your children get older and they're ready for more advanced concepts, your role as that home educator transitions from a deliberate teacher and educator and question answerer to a guide, and you will point them in the right direction to find the answers that they need. So
kind of along the lines of my answer to that question is, my answer to that question is probably based on like general psychology of a human. Most people, general knowledge and stuff like that in school and education for the most part is taught, but the majority of people, if they're never ever going to use it in life, then they're not going to be interested in it, and stuff like that. I mean, how much of us went through trigonometry class and algebra class in high school, and how much of us actually use it? You know what I mean? The majority of people don't actually use actual trigonometry to an extent, so much so that you would actually need to go through that. Some people do, but most people don't. And the typically speaking, the majority of the people that do know and want to, and they go in that direction on their own. And they actually, I don't even know, I can't even remember the word for a self-taught person. Like, I don't know, I remember what the word is. There's a word for it.
Renaissance man?
No, that's a movie.
Oh, that's that's a movie. No, the Renaissance man is a man that is trained and learned multiple areas, and is not basically not the ace of anything, but, or what is it, the jack of all trades, but the ace of none.
Yeah.
But not to cut you off, the one thing is while you're thinking about that is the other thing, like going back to the legacy and dynasty teaching values, is like when you talk about how are we going to teach the kids certain topics. So, for an example, I use a thing called Time for Learning with my son, right? It's a online course. And the nice thing is if I went out and bought the curriculum and didn't do online, I would have bought kindergarten because that's what he went into, right? Well, with the system I'm using, and I'm using the online because it's flexible and allows me to see where he is, that I can adjust it to his level. And, with the online version, I sit there and I started him off in kindergarten. And then after a week saying, okay, well, you're just, all this, we switched to first grade and now we're in second grade in a lot of the stuff. And even he's looking at finishing up second grade on some topics. And literally, there's online courses, there's people that are willing to, if you contact certain companies and say, hey, I want to teach my kid this, would you be willing to do a apprenticeship, or would you be willing to do this? The other advantage of this is with the homeschooling and the dynasty and doing all these things is you're opening your kid up to be able to figure out what they want to learn. So it's not a program, it's not everything's just a simple program focused on you need to learn this, because public school ended up becoming more focused about getting people to follow instructions, basically become good little factory workers, and the better ones become good little managers and manage the factory workers and things like that. But that, with all that saying, is so as my kid gets older, right now he's out in nature class. He has a 4-hour nature class and he loves it. He adores it because he's taught me more about nature than I think I've ever even heard in my lifetime. And so with him, it's just the fact of he loves nature. Now that might change, but right now I can get him in classes that and do things that help him nurture that love of nature. And who knows what he'll do with it in the future, but with that, he's able to find his passion, enjoy it, learn from it, compared to and while he's doing it, he's also finding like the love of it, and seeing that I'm supporting him. I'm there with him. So he's just seeing my value, and a lot of being present with him is helping him get those things. Just like, and I hate to say it, last night, I was trying to get him ready for bed. I was trying to get myself around, and I said, go to your room, get dressed. He follows me, goes, I'm following you because I love you. I have to follow you. I'm like, go get dressed. Now, there's there's a good chance that if I send him to public school or something like that, him and I are not going to have that connection. We might have a connection, but it's going to be okay. I'm getting frustrated because he's not listening, because I don't spend all my time with him to understand this. I don't have that same connection that you spend when you are around your kid all the time, when they're focused on the family instead of like you said, Mr. Pancake, about the looking cool, dressing a certain way, trying to have the latest fashion and latest hairstyle. And I mean, at this point, I cut my kid's hair, I cut my hair. We are definitely not fashionable by any means.
My wife shaves my head, and I'm losing some, slowly but surely.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things that I think that everything, even the going off on the homeschooling, it's a big part of building that dynasty and that legacy, and something that dads need to focus on. And, you know, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think a part of it also is dads, like, they're not connecting with other dads that have the same values. They're hearing, they're trying to find answers, but the only answers they're finding is people telling them, oh, well, if you do this, your children are going to be horrible because of A, B, and C. and then they don't research or look into it because they're afraid of A, B, and C.
Mhm. Well, that also comes down to the conformity thing as well. If you've gone through your entire childhood, uh, instead of truly individuating, and you've kind of been forced into conformity through the education system or through the lack of parental stewardship, you then, as an adult, struggle to individuate as well. And when you hear the opinions of others, or like the hive mind's view on things, you tend to assimilate those opinions a lot faster. So for us as parents trying to forge a generational legacy, we need to break that pattern of conformity, and it starts with us. And it can be hard at times. I still fall victim to it. It comes down to us to break that pattern, and then be that pattern interrupt in our legacy as well, in our lineage. And all it takes is one, and it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort. But when it's done, from there on out, it's much easier. Especially now that we have all these resources at our fingertips. Books, the internet, social media platforms, for example, they can be a tool or a shackle, but using them as a tool is very empowering for us to help break that pattern and to build upon what we have been given, because we are in a very advantageous time in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of disadvantages being in this period as well. My wife and I was talking last night, like, wouldn't it be, they're reading Little House in the Woods, which is like the prequel to Little House in the Prairie, or Little House in the Big Woods, I think it is. And my wife was saying, wouldn't it be nice if you could just go out and shoot a deer and then just go to the store and sell the skin, instead of working 10 hours a day on the computer? I was like, man, that would be nice, wouldn't it? That's just not how it works. But instead now, we're in a time when we can create abundance for our family through these tools and channels that we're given. And in order to avoid that trap, I suppose, of being stuck in a job, and it works for a lot of people. I mean, if you've got time for this, I would like to talk about this as well. But instead of creating this trap where we get stuck in a job, there's lots of quotes, but a couple that come to mind are, you can't take it with you, or he who dies with the most toys wins. These are the mentality that's going to be baked into us through that conformity mindset, where it's like, well, we can't take it with us, so why not spend it all? But really, we should be thinking, we can't take it with us, so why not leave it to our children? That's really what we should be building on. And like I said there, and we can transition and move back to the generational wealth and legacy building stuff, is that we might be in this mentality where we have a job, and jobs kind of suit most people. I mean, it does take serious work to create a business. I've done multiple, never anything huge, nothing seven figures or anything like that. I wish, but I have built multiple businesses, sold some have flopped. I had my fair share of failures, but for the people that do have a job, they still should be treating their family as though they're in business, and you don't have to go and have this huge startup. I mean, I have done e-commerce stores. I've had vending machine. I've had my first business fire was worms, believe it or not. I don't have to get into that now. We'll be here today. But I've done a lot of different things. But ultimately, along the way, what I have learned is that every family needs to act as though it's in business. And one of the products of this business is creating competent adults to help come into the business, help come into the family. And the other thing is making sure that you are providing a good foundation. And yeah, you can build a business that throws off appreciable income. And if you feel inclined to, or you have the drive to, or desire, it's worth having a go. It doesn't. Nowadays. You don't have to invest like 50 grand into getting like a storefront sign and stock and everything like that. You can start for free, quote unquote, but it's going to be a lot harder. But for minimal investments, like Lords of X, for example, you want to market yourself on social media, you want to get a whole bunch of connections, you want courses, $25 a month. Who doesn't have $25 a month to spare? Who doesn't believe in themselves enough to invest $25 a month to grow a business and build something for their family? But putting all that aside, if you really are adamant that you don't have what it takes, I suppose, you don't have $25 a month or whatever, or you just want to take a less engaged route where you want to build something passive, you should still be building a family business. And it doesn't have to be e-commerce. It doesn't have to be personal brand, digital media empire. You can just build a portfolio of investments. Treat it like an investment. Take a portion of your earnings each week or month, whenever you get paid, and put it into the market. Treat it like a business. Build this foundation under you, and then use that as a tool to help your children build upon top of that. So they might want to start a business, they might want to go to college, whatever it is. Instead of forcing them into student debt, like so many parents feel they're forced to, they can then borrow from the family. And again, I say borrow because you don't want to be doing too many handouts for your children, because that is where the laziness does come in. But you can give your children a specific advantage by allowing them to leverage the family funds. It might be borrowed at 0.1% interest, but they need to understand that there is a payback that goes into the family. And with this family money, this pool of capital that is used as a tool, not for any lavish spending purposes for individuals. Like you might have a family, if you have the means, you might have a family boat or a family retreat, but ultimately it shouldn't be, I bought this person a house, because that's not going to encourage them to build something for themselves. And that's where that saying comes in, the father builds, the son buys, the son sells, the son begs. You need to build this perpetual state of creation. So you have creation, you have stasis and entropy. And an object in motion stays in motion. Once you have the state of creation, you're able to perpetually push forward, and it's easier to stay in motion and keep building. But if you let your family fall into stasis, it's much harder to get back to creation. You need some kind of driving force. And without you there as the founding father, as the family patriarch to push it, and you haven't put anyone in that position after you're gone, raised another family member to that patriarch status, there's not going to be anyone to get that motion back going. And then what happens is you fall into entropy and your family falls apart. And that happens to 90% plus of families after the family patriarch goes. The grandfather dies, they stop getting together for family family meals or events or whatever, and it eventually just falls apart. So it's about systemizing it and making sure that you are putting the right pieces in place to propel your family forward. For a lot of families, it's a business, as in like a physical business, like something that you run and operate. But every family needs some kind of shared asset that is going to serve as that tool to jettison them forward. And if you really are adamant you don't want to start a business, despite the fact that we're in such an advantageous time where it's not that challenging to start, for $25 a month, it's very easy to build this foundation for yourself. If you're adamant you don't want to do that, then at least treating your investment portfolio as a set of family assets. There has to be a sacrifice along the way, and if you felt you didn't have to be that person who sacrifices, you'd already be living in a dynasty. It always starts with you. You can't go sideways, you can't go backwards, you can only go forwards. There's very few instances where I've seen where it hasn't been an individual man who has been the first father who has started something from there. Like the two that come to mind. One was a woman a widow who inherited her husband's farm, or received her husband's farm, and her son worked with her to build that farm up. And another were twin brothers. Those are the only two instances I've found, and they're like quite unique cases. Like, I don't want to recommend that guys die so they can build a dynasty, and I don't want them to go and find their long lost twin brother or clone themselves or whatever. So it's really down to you as the founding fathers, the patriarch of your family, to progress forward and build something. And that was my long-winded trying to fit everything into one rant.
Oh, that's good. I would say, to add to that, one thing that I've noticed, everything that you said is great, and adding to it is, along the way, you are going to get every single family member and every single friend and every single person telling you you're wrong. Every single corner and every single way. And doing, even in simple things such as, for the longest time, for the longest time, for like the first 3 years of my child's life, my daughter did not last in the car for more than 5-10 minutes without like bloody murder, like veins coming out of her neck. And everybody, including my grandmother, and my grandfather and my dad, just put a screen in front of her, let her, dope her up with some Benadryl, drop a screen in front of her, and let her just, for the whole ride, just ride on down. All my friends said to do it. My grandparents said to do it. And we just, nope, sorry, nope, sorry, nope, sorry. And today it has served us well, because our kid is not a dopamine fiend for the iPad. We don't even own iPads. I mean, so it's great. And it's the same goes for like financial or starting a business. everyone's going to tell you, oh, it's stupid, and then you're going to have the people, I'm a super Trump supporter, but everybody's going to be like, oh, Biden's in office, so you're just going to screw up having a business right now, so don't let the naysayers bash you.
Absolutely.
Don't ever take advice from somebody that's not where you want to be. If they're not where you want to be, they're looking at you as where they want to be, so they're going to tell you no, so they can go there and you don't.
And it's about surrounding yourself with the right-minded people as well. So it's important to find the right people to put into your life or to spend time with, so you can help build upon that mentality and also encourage it in other people as well. Like if you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly putting you down, and some people are forced into that environment. I know I was, but you can replace those. Again, I'm not a big fan of tech, but you can use technology as a replacement for those people. So when I used to work a job a lot of hours. Like I was given an opportunity. It was 22, 23, and it was like, you can work as much as you like. I don't care about the laws. I don't care about you being tired on the job. I need somebody to work as many hours as possible. I need somebody good. You want to do it? And I said yes. So I was given shift work at a factory, and that's like an electrical job. And they were like, right, well, as long as you can do the breakdowns, we don't care what you do in the meantime. I was like, sweet. Okay, so now we'll go and do another job. So I took on a day job with doing electrical work, and then I also had my own contracts on the side. So I was doing like 90-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks, I think 120 or 119. I was annoyed that I didn't get to 120, but that was like my record in terms of like hours worked in a week. And I amassed all these hours up, and the whole time people were saying, you're crazy, you shouldn't do this, you're wasting your youth. And from their perspective, I looked that way. I wasn't going out and getting blackout drunk. I wasn't spending it on lavish cars. I drove this. I said this on another, I think it was a space recently. I had this van. I said it on the space recently, but I bought this van, and it didn't have a steering wheel. And so I got 2 pairs of ice grips, double redundancy, There's 2 pairs of ice grips, click, click, and now I had like this pirate, like a pirate ship steering this. But did get a steering wheel, but that was like the sacrifices I made. So I had more money to buy houses, so I had more money to invest. And people were saying I was crazy. And it was only like 3 days of no steering wheel until I found one. But it was a matter of me making these sacrifices and putting this work in, despite everyone around me telling me I was crazy. And now those same people are still trying to save to buy a house, and mortgage free, live in rural New Zealand, work on dialysis. That's my full time work. Have an e-commerce store, all that kind of stuff. And these people are still in the same factory, still trying to save up to buy a house or pay off their mortgage or paying down their cars. And those are the people that were telling me I was crazy. And now they say they're jealous, and that's exactly what happens. It's a matter of just surrounding yourself with the people that tell you you're not crazy. And if you can't find them for whatever reason, you can go on YouTube and watch people that are successful or have that same mentality, and then use that as a replacement for some of the people that you spend your time with. And it's well worth doing. That's what I did, because I was working in a factory these late nights, and the people in the factory were factory workers mostly, and the people that would tell me I was crazy. So instead of that, I just found content that helped me become the kind of person I wanted to be. And now, fortunately, we have groups you can join, Lords of X, another pitch there. But there's also X. You can use that as a means to find the right kind of people. I'd probably avoid things like Instagram, and I don't know Facebook at all, so I won't say anything. I actually don't know Instagram either, but I know what the culture is like on there. Very anything that's kind of picture centric, they are going to try and it's really just highlights, and it can breed a jealousy or an unrealistic expectation as well. So text-based stuff's really good. Video stuff's also really good in terms of the content that you want, and also finding communities as well that are aligned with your values or the values that you wish you had. But yeah, that covers everything that I want to say in that. Again, another famous Ben Black rant. I do tend to go on them semi-frequently.
So tell me this, with all that being done, with Lords of X, for where dads can go and find other dads that are trying to make a difference, be better, grow a business so that they can be more independent. I mean, there's tons of resources out there. There's many ways to build up a dynasty, and it's not all about just being financially wealthy. Don't get me wrong, it'd be nice to have financial wealth and be able just to sit back and smoke a nice cigar and drink a glass of wine and tell your kids how to invest and blah blah blah. Be fantastic, but that's not the standard likelihood of most people. What what do people really need to strive for if they want to pass down a dynasty? I mean, we've discussed it in many different ways in different topics and all this in the hour and 15 hour and so minutes that we've been talking. What, to summarize it, I guess is the best way to say it, what do you feel like dads and families really need to focus on to build up that dynasty to keep passing down? Because dynasty does build up, you do build up a financial to pass along, but there's multiple layers to it.
So if I could summarize it in one actionable step, there was one actionable step that people could take wherever they are now, broke, destitute, or unfathomably rich. It would be prioritize the relationship that you have with your children. If you're prioritizing the relationship you have with your children and embodying the kind of culture that is cohesive, like a culture of cooperation, then that's really the best first step you can take towards forging your family legacy. Because if the members aren't close, if there's no glue that holds them together, then you don't really have a dynasty at all. It's going to fall apart. It's like the egg in a cake. It's just going to be a crumble otherwise. So you need to put a focus on your family, and also I would say, like, if there's an easy way to frame that and to adapt your mentality, is to reframe your position in life. So when you say, oh, I've got to go to my job, I hate it, instead of thinking of it like that, think, okay, well, my job's an income stream for my legacy, for my dynasty. It's one of the income streams that I've managed to establish. I've gotten a job, it trickles money into my family's account, it covers all of our expenses. Another one is stop calling yourself, I'm just a dad. You're a founding father of your legacy. And once you start adapting your language and your self-referential terms to these, like instead of saying my kids, you say my descendants. These different terms that you use will change your mentality and help keep you motivated. And maybe more than that, they'll be a source of consistent inspiration that will drive you to improve your family and take it to the next level as well. So that would be my number one thing I would say for people. Focus on family culture, children first, and reframing your position.
All right. So let's do this because I try to keep these close to an hour because obviously I have about 4 to 5 topics after this conversation that I can easily lead us into that could probably lead into another 4 or 5 hours of ramblings and discussions.
I can talk about this all day. If I had time.
Yeah, you and I've talked over Messenger a few times, and I know well enough that we can go into different streams of conversation. So, hint the reason I said there's a lot of topics we can go into and discuss and really do deeper dives into. And, maybe it's something we should look at in the future to be able to get back into more of this, talk about specific areas of building a legacy so that people can be able to use your information and hopefully be smart enough to go to Lords of X, and which there's a link in the show notes that you can click on to go there. And it's an affiliate link, so you help out Call with Dads when you do it as well as yourself. But with all that, we should kind of let people know where they can find you, what email address, what is the best place if somebody wants to reach out to you. What do you prefer?
So I have an X account, x.com/dynastis. That's where I post most of my content. I've recently started a podcast, and by recently I mean like 2 days ago. So I don't even have a link ready for you yet, but I can send it to you guys. You can check in the show notes if you like. If you want to, you can email me, but honestly, message me on X is probably better. But if you want to, you can email me, ben@dynastis.com. And in saying that, my website is dynastis.com. And if you jump on my X profile, you can go to my bio link and you'll see everything that I've done. I've got books, I've got courses, I've got free resources for you there as well, which I'm considering reducing the availability of. So if you are interested, then I definitely say go and check those out soon. But most of all, like you said, Lords of X, if you're serious about building a family legacy, about building a business, about building a following online, then you're not going to find better value. It's a paid private community that gives busy fathers all they need to build their influence on X. And with it, you'll get courses, accountability, there's collaboration opportunities, but most of all, there's distribution to help you get eyes on your content so you can grow your following faster. So you can check that out. Use their affiliate link, please. I like to help all the dads out in there. So please use their affiliate link in the show notes. And yeah, that's my pitch. So
Sounds good. So, Mr. Pancake, you?
Yeah, same with me. I have obviously the X, which is we all know Twitter. So you can find me on X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also go to pancakeswithyourdad.com. If you want to email me direct, info@pancakeswithyourdad.com, but all those links are on just the website. So just go directly to www.pancakeswithyourdad.com. And if anybody has any questions or ideas or thoughts about going or joining Lords of X, definitely come to one of us and ask. My personal experience in my website, just my numbers and stats have gone up from about 20 personnel a day to about 200 a day. And I mean, depending on the post, sometimes it goes to 500 and then it comes back down. But it's slowly growing about 10 to 20%, I would say, every week. Sometimes drawn out about 2 weeks, 10 to 20% in 2 weeks. Just depends on my content availability, because sometimes I get busy with my normal life and forget to post. But yeah, I have grown quite a bit as well. So joining Lords of X is definitely helping with a lot of stuff.
Oh,
right
and
here.
I'll even say just call dads, even with our small accounts, because I'm not, I'm horrible about social media, and Lords of X has helped me. But the podcast itself has grown quite extensively to where we're in I think the average numbers of downloads per just the audio file. We went from a average downloads to one of the upper percentages of podcasts. So now we're getting about, I think it's almost 100 downloads per episode on the original day of launch. So, and then that's not including all the other people coming later to listen, which is fantastic, because that means we're getting our message out more and more, and people are hearing these stories like Ben explaining how to build a dynasty so you can have your family continue, and your vision can help your descendants be able to live a good life. So Lords of X is a fantastic place. Mr. Pancake and I both have seen benefits from it in different ways, but still, nonetheless, we've seen the benefits of it. With that being said, call dads. You can go to our website where we have the audio podcast. We have links to almost everywhere you want to find the podcast itself. So you can click on there. You can find our affiliates links like Time for Learning, which I personally use to help my kid with homeschooling. Lords of X. There's Leonardo AI, that a lot of the imagery that we use is through AI generation. So there's those there that you can click on, and if you use the service and you pay for it, it helps out Call with Dad, so that, like I constantly am saying, or getting more and used to saying, is that you using our affiliate links help us grow, be able to afford to do things that's going to help us provide you better services. Also, we are, by the time this comes out, we should have the Call with Dad's newsletter up, which, speaking of newsletters, you can go to pancakeswithyourdad.com, and if you sign up for his newsletter, you can get a free coloring book. And I can tell you, my son and daughter both like to use them. I printed several sheets many times at this point, because my daughter's coloring skills at 2 years old is not the greatest. So it gets reprinted quite a bit. But with that being said, I want to thank everybody for being here listening. Ben, thank you for coming on. Like I said, this is something I have a feeling we need to break down into little portions at a time. We got a great overview of everything. Now we need to dive deeper into it to let people be able to build that dynasty that is going to build their future. And if you don't want to wait till the next show with Ben on, people, go to Lords of X. So
Sure.
we're obviously plugging that quite a bit this episode. But Ben,
I
if you can
appreciate
hold
it.
on, if you can hold on for us for a moment, this is going to be the end for everybody else. We're going to talk for a few more minutes, but yeah, if you hold on, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Thanks,
problem.
guys.
Thanks for being here. Or thanks for having me, rather.